Get comfortable with being uncomfortable and you'll be successful.
IT certifications as we know them might never be the same again. And this isn't clickbait. With CompTIA's recent acquisition by private equity, big changes are coming and they could completely reshape the future of your IT career. But that's not all. In this episode, we're uncovering a surprising shift in how hiring managers are viewing certifications lately versus real-world skills, and why this could be the game changer no one is talking about yet. Today, we're tackling a massive question. Is this the end of IT certifications as we know them? Joining me to break all this down is Wes Bryan, a former IT trainer with ITProTV and someone who has spent years helping professionals navigate certifications and grow their careers. Today, we'll explore what CompTIA's recent acquisition means for their certifications and the broader landscape of certifications in 2025, and also whether certifications are still worth pursuing in an era of rapidly changing tech. It's not just about certifications anymore. There's a growing debate whether skills and real-world experience are overtaking certs in importance. Stick around because Wes is bringing his insider perspective to help you future-proof your career. Without any further ado, let's roll into this week's episode. Wes, welcome to the show. Do you mind taking a few minutes and introducing yourself for those who might not be familiar with who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm an educator. Essentially, I've been providing certification and skills-based training for thousands of students, over the past almost 15 years now or so, right around. I started my career as a career changer who got into IT by taking certification training and certification and lab-based training, if you will. I moved into the training aspect really early on in my career, and it's worked out. I've taught in a variety of different methods over the years, tilt, traditional instructor-led training, online remote training. I was a mentored learning instructor for a while, helping people out where they are and what certification they're specifically looking at, including developing individual student strategies around practice exams. I've done things like recorded studio-based training as well. I've developed curriculum and labs around the same kind of certification-based content. And for the majority of my career, I've specialized in TIA certifications. Not that I haven't taught other ones, but those seem to be my focus, and really around the core certifications, the ones that we know, the ones that we kind of can repeat in our sleep. Maybe some of us do. A plus, Net plus, Security plus.
Absolutely. Let's just dive right into our conversation. What's your initial reaction when you heard the news of CompTIA being acquired by private equity?
Well, it hits a couple of different ways. There's some positives that I've thought about, but there are also some potential negatives. I say potential negatives. It doesn't mean that they're negatives right now, but like we can always play Monday morning quarterback, time will tell. From my aspect, one of the things that I thought about are, some of the positives for IT professionals out there is that, with the private equity, it does give a potential. Again, depends on how it's implemented, but it gives the potential for increased access to a broader set of resources.
The game is Settlers of Catan.
So, for instance, one of the things that I thought was really good, I got to go out and attend the last CompTIA Channel Con and see a lot of the great favorites that I love connecting with out there. And one of the things that they had was a hologram basically system where they could do a remote trainer, and they could essentially ship this thing in a box out to somebody and put a trainer in the room, and that trainer could be halfway across the world. And with me just being a tech geek as I am, I'm kind of salivating at that stuff. I know some people will be like, well, what's the kicker on that one? But for an example, right? So that kind of innovation and forward thinking will provide, again, it's all potential, but greater reachability. The other thing that we've seen too is that a greater diversification in their certification based, right? We've already seen this. Anybody that's had their ear to the ground or eyes on the screen have seen that CompTIA in the last year has a major push to increase their certification offerings. In fact, so much so that it's like one of the biggest increases that we've seen in the CompTIA space in a very long time. Almost so going back, and I know, Dakota, you and I have talked before about this. If you think about it, would it be about 10 years ago? Maybe not, maybe about 10 years ago when Microsoft decided to go away from their MCSE tracks. And I know some of that was due to the term engineer in other countries and stuff. But the way that they had tackled it was by creating 50,000 other certifications under the MCITP moniker, right? So it got a little bit too broad in what its application. It's not that way anymore, but so that's what I'm saying. That could be good. It could be a bad thing. We'll see. But yeah, certainly increasing their cert offering is something that we could see. I already know because we have this, or they have this little A plus series, which is kind of the bridge between something as big as A plus and maybe you just need to focus on networking because maybe you don't want to take the A plus certification, but you do want to get into networking. I know that was your path. I know not maybe the certification, but I know you love networking. So why should I have to sit an entire A plus class and get the 5 inches deep, 5 miles wide, mountain of information? So we're already seeing that as we speak. We're seeing things like digital literacy and competency, not the same thing. You might be able to speak the language, but implementing it is different.
Yeah.
You can see this with their new line of the expert series that's come out, which I got the privilege of taking the Security X exam. They say that it's CAS Plus rebranded. Maybe. I don't know. I didn't take CAS, but I did take Security X, and it's a very well-rounded performance-based certification. Don't get me wrong, all certifications have some kind of stuff that revolves around rogue memorization, a specification here or there, a standard here and there, and if you're in cybersecurity, especially at the compliance level, that's going to happen.
Right.
Back to the certification aspect of it, we might see greater focus on emerging technologies that maybe they've already emerged, but people have yet to focus on them, right? Edge networking is very, very big right now. Maybe we'll see something there. Things like a greater lineup of AI, because everybody wants AI right now, but which part of AI do you want? So I think we'll see potentially things like that. Hey, let's focus on things like 5G networks, right? Actually supporting the technology. There's a big push for MSPs, managed service providers. Maybe they do something that focuses on that. How do I become an employee at a managed service provider, right? Without just saying, okay, get your A plus, Net plus, go to Cloud plus. So we might see some things like that. So those are some of the things that I think that could potentially have a benefit too, but there are definitely some potential negatives. And my first thing that I think of in private equity buying out a company like that is, what does it do for its reputation?
Right.
Is this going to be a profit chasing endeavor? Because let's face it, you don't spend all the money for an organization like this company, this equity company has, without expecting profits back. I mean, that's just business. I understand that.
Well, and CompTIA has always prided themselves on being a non-for-profit and a vendor neutral and all that stuff. And now it feels like, well, they might be going away from that, kind of expectation.
Yeah, there were rumblings at the ChannelCon too, vendor specific.
Yeah.
CompTIA branded certifications, which is definitely an interesting thing, and that's where some of the negativity, at least from a mindset, might slip in there a little bit, because, well, then which vendor, is it? Does it go by, again, back to profit chasing? Does it go to which vendor pays the most? Is which certifications get pushed up in priority? I'm not saying it is. I'm not accusing anybody, but this is definitely something we have to worry. We would have to watch. Back to the profit chasing as well. Increase costs, right? Are we going to increase the cost? Are they going to continually increase the cost of certifications that makes it unreachable, right? Are you limiting or even potentially, I hope not, but eliminating certain demographics, right? Whether it be an underprivileged demographic. I know when a few years ago when I got to go to Across Seas, they were doing a road show, and there were a lot of markets that were just being able to get into the certification at all, to bring any of that to their country,
Right.
and their demographic. So an increase on those prices, especially a dramatic one, it could hurt the CompTIA brand.
It could hurt the industry as in a whole. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
As someone who, like, I specialize in trying to get people started in the tech industry, I constantly hear like, oh, I can't afford the certification as of now. Could you imagine if the price starts climbing? I feel like there's examples of that we've seen. There's the big debate a while ago with the CEH, just being so darn expensive, and the return on investment and stuff like that, and other certifications financially just almost didn't make sense to try to obtain those. Are we going to start seeing that price creep even more with
Sure.
CompTIA now being owned by private equity. You know, they're going to want their return on their investment. I understand that, but yeah,
But how aggressive is that return on investment going to get to? Because that's going to hurt.
exactly.
One of the immediate thoughts that I have is, let's face it, CompTIA has been that standard, like you mentioned, for in vendor neutral training. All right, they are a 17024 ISO accreditation, which is just a big fancy term for the fact that they have to go like Cisco. Cisco's been that forever. I mean, it goes back to the days of you having to renew your CompTIA certification.
Right.
You have somebody that's in another field, like I said, I just pick on Cisco because I know that you've always had to renew. Well, what happens to that type of status, right? When if everything's brought into house, right?
Right.
Are there going to be changes to the certification delivery, right? Will it continue to be a third-party vendor, such as somebody like Pearson and OnView, who have made it their mission to deliver exams?
Right.
So if I take this in, but I don't have the 30 years experience of this platform, does that mean they have to buy another platform? What will that end user experience be like if things go in-house from that perspective? And then back to the ISO accreditation. Only reason I mention that is because how will the scrutiny be? Because that's how you maintain that accreditation. So it is worldwide recognized. Doesn't matter where I'm in the world.
Right.
I can have that certification because we have somebody like the ISO that is overseeing almost like quality checks. I guess is what I'm, the word that I'm searching for.
We touched on this, but like, what do you feel like? Like your gut feeling, you know, do you think they're going to start prioritizing profits over the value of the certifications? Do you think the certifications are going to become less relevant when it comes to like people trying to land jobs? Right now, you know, there's a lot of CompTIA certifications. You go out and get a certification. Though I never say a certification will get you the jobs. They'll definitely help get you the door into an interview. Do you think they're going to start slipping back and other certification vendors are going to start coming forward to fill that gap?
I think that's going to be an inevitable thing because I think one of the times you and I talked before, we were talking about, and I have no experience. I'm not trying to say I've never worked with a machine, but you look back at the days of Novell. Where are they?
Yeah.
They're non-existent. So I think that is largely going to be dictated by who's moving the industry, right? You have so many different vendors out there that are giving certifications now. Does it happen to pull CompTIA back under the shadow of other certifications? At this point I'm not sure, but back when we were talking about A plus starting out, of course we could say we didn't have the cloud, but you didn't have AWS certifications, right? We had Microsoft, we've had those certifications for a while.
Right.
But you could see a vendor like somebody like AWS coming onto the scenes, Google. Google's another one, with GCP, and I'm not saying that they're more relevant than CompTIA, but the more players that you have, it'll be interesting to see, are you leading that market? Are you looking, horizontally
Right.
at what your competitors are doing, what the other people are doing?
Definitely, I've observed that it seems like the actual vendor specific certifications like Azure and GCP and stuff like that are becoming more relevant, you know, being more acknowledged by employers than like CompTIA certifications in the cloud space. You know,
Mhm.
you see a lot more employers asking for like Azure or, you know, AWS certifications than you're seeing like Cloud Plus or whatever. I don't know if you've kind of noticed the same lately.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you've coached, and that's what you do, coach a lot of students going. And we probably have said some of the same things, right? These are foundational certifications.
Yeah.
Now that there's something to be said, and we'll see about the expert series because they've definitely stepped up, the requirements around certifications. You can't really just say CompTIA's entry level certification anymore.
Right.
So I would say I would continue to see the things like the core certifications continue to be recognized just because they have such a long track record of holding value. But I think, maybe a little bit too soon to say this, but I think gone are the days where you could just be a paper IT pro.
Well, and that leads to my next question. Do you think IT certifications in general, not just CompTIA, still hold the same weight as they used to 5, 10 years ago?
So I can't speak from a hiring manager standpoint. I can speak from a training standpoint. And based off the training industry, you have so many companies out there right now that are trying to provide complete solutions, right? These LMS platforms, they continue to have
Yeah.
a massive popularity with major companies. In fact, right before I left my last employer, Lockheed was one of them, right? And if you look at a company like some of these big companies like that, these and the reason I mentioned the training aspect of is because what does the training platform provide? If you look at what the training platform is providing to the people that are doing the hiring,
Right.
they're still asking for certifications. However, However, they're looking at a complete solution, which doesn't just include certifications anymore. They want to see things like, the management, the integration, the visibility over the process, and that is a full process. Whether it is a process from sitting the class, learning the technology, or it's maybe the end goal is certification.
Right.
But we're still seeing a lot of that, right? And there's a high demand for that as well. And I'm not saying that the market isn't oversaturated with it, but there's still a high demand, especially if you look in the government sectors. They really remain highly relevant there,
Yeah.
especially with a lot of the initiatives that are still going on too, that are requiring these certifications.
100%. I literally just before this we hopped on this call here, I was doing a coaching call with someone who is in the in the government sector looking to move into cybersecurity within the government sector, and I was like, well, you're gonna have to get the CompTIA Security Plus. Kind of going back to CompTIA, but like
Sure.
here in the US, if you want a government cybersecurity job, I can almost guarantee you one of those requirements is going to be the Security Plus. Like you just they won't even look at you. Yes, most of them will like, well, we'll give you 6 months to get it, but
Sure.
in honesty, when it comes to government jobs, like you might as someone else, the other people that are applying for that job likely already have that certification. And if you can't check that box that you do, you're going to have a lot more of an uphill battle.
That's a great point too, and that's one of the things that going back to my days when I was doing mentored learning, and in fact the advice that I got from my instructor, really, I'm just taking it from an instructor that gave it to me, one of my mentors, that said when you have certain certifications, you might have a single one, but some of the other ones that you have shorten the pool of people that you're competing against when it comes to that job.
Right.
And that's why I do believe they are relevant today.
What would you advise for someone like they're just starting out in IT, they're just breaking in? Should they prioritize certifications in the beginning, or should they prioritize like hands-on skills or something else entirely?
I think both. I still think both, right? With so many different companies out there focusing on things like hands-on solutions, it shows you that there is an importance in the hands-on skills. I believe that the certifications themselves show that to an employer that you can learn a highly complex set of topics. Or in this case, if it's just learning the language, right? Sometimes it's just learning the language, being able to speak and have a conversation about the technologies. I think that's what it proves. It proves, the certifications prove that you can commit to something and you can learn the technology enough to be competent in it. However, I would always encourage somebody start with the hands-on. Both, you got to have them both.
Yeah.
It's read the manual. Well, why are you reading the manual? Because it contains the information that you need to consume to do the hands-on implementation of what it is. And that's where I think certifications help you out. They kind of help you read the manual ahead of time. But that in and of itself, reading the manual is great, but we don't want a bedtime story. We want to actually implement the technologies too.
Yeah.
And if we think about it, Dakota, I mean, hands-on has always run hand in hand with training solutions.
It has. I mean,
Doesn't matter who you talk to.
if you want to actually absorb the material, I feel like you have to do the hands-on part. I know there's people out there that will just go and read the material and will learn it. And some people can do that. Like, I won't knock those people. And I envy those people who can just read the technical manual and instantly absorb that knowledge. For the rest of us humans out there,
Those on planet Earth, yes.
um, you know, yeah. If you truly want to learn something, like you have to get hands on with it. I mean, you could take it one step further. Like, I believe the best way to learn something is to turn around and try to teach it. I think that's the best way to truly test if you know something, is to learn it, do it, and then turn around and teach it. That will really go and prove that when you're going into the interview. That's just another thing you can mention. Like, not only did I go do the certifications, but here's some of the projects I did along the way to get that certification. I think that is something to be said about that.
Absolutely. Build your own environment, maintain it. Because I will tell you, I mean, this isn't the Wizard of Oz. If you pull back the curtain once in a while, you'll see I can break a network with the best of them.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
But that's where I learn. And in fact, in some of the courses that I've taught where I'm doing something and people go, oh man, that's awesome that you knew it. You knew how to do it. You demonstrated how to do it. I don't have to tell you, Dakota, you know this.
Yeah.
You didn't see the 15 times the tally light came on and it went, that does not work. That's broke. And I just let the magic smoke out.
Oh gosh. Yeah. We could have a whole episode where we just talk about that. I can't tell you how many times like I've been to create a demonstrational video and I go to try to do something. I'm like, that's not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
What on earth's going on here? And I got to like redo it 5 times for it to finally work the proper way. Okay. Why didn't it work the first 5 times I tried?
Sure. And what did every one of those times, other than frustrate you a little bit, do? They helped to solidify the process of implementing whatever it was you implemented.
Exactly.
It just goes back to what you said. And again, you look at things like virtualization.
Right.
I came into this industry just on the cusp of virtualization becoming a little bit cheaper. And in fact, I think one of the last training institutes I was working in where we weren't really implementing virtualization completely is the way we see it today.
Right.
We were doing thin client deployments, right? We had a cluster where you visit a desktop, you know, the whole infrastructure behind it. But then you get virtualization and it's like now every machine can have its own machines within a machine, you know. Inception and the ability to go out to different places and download the stuff that you need to literally practice what people practice in data centers today is just amazing, right? You look at something like Packet Tracer now that's made available from Cisco, and you have full functionality to an iOS operating system. The drag and drop capabilities and the connections, you know.
The tools have never been easier.
Yes. You know, I have...
No, I was just going to say, I remember the day back when Packet Tracer wasn't free. And you either had to go through Netacad,
Sure.
Cisco's learning platform, or you had to obtain it other methods.
Sure enough, sure.
For those of you who are just listening, I do an air quotes there. I never did that, Cisco. Gosh.
I don't like the look of those air quotes.
Yeah, no, never. Yeah, I remember, and I'm sure you probably did this too. I'm like, okay, I have 7 Dell Dimensions that were given to me because they didn't want them anymore. I'll scrub the hard drives, and now I've got a mini network.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I literally have them still up and going in my garage right now. So
yeah.
I get the look at from my wife, that just glares at me like whenever I bring home, like, oh, but they're gonna throw it out and it works just fine. But
that's right.
Going back at that, there's multiple ways to get this hands-on experience, whether it's virtualization or using recycled hardware. Like I've created videos on, like, if you're studying for a networking certification, you can go on eBay and buy old used equipment that can still do everything you need to learn for that certification. You don't have to spend hundreds of dollars to get your hands on physical gear. You can do it pretty inexpensive nowadays. You can virtualize all day long, but sometimes there's something about like feeling that Ethernet cable click into that socket. Like you can't emulate that. You can't virtualize that. And it's just those hands-on experience. Having that before you go land that job is a game changer.
Yeah, and I think that helps to build the confidence too. I think in one of the interviews that you and I talked last, we talked about the big, the imposter syndrome. Well, a lot of people have it.
Yeah.
But one of the best things that you can do to just always, like I said, remain humble. But one of the best things that you can do is just to constantly break it. Right? Get in there. Don't be afraid to break it because you'll figure out how to fix it. And if you don't figure out how to fix it, and that becomes a continuation of your experience, maybe you need to think of different methods, to get that knowledge under there. But
yeah.
Just the fact that we've got access to all of this technology, I highly recommend somebody starting by just building your own lab. Figure out first of all, figure out what you want to do.
True.
That's the big thing.
No, absolutely. It helps to have a direction. And, I get people coming to me all the time saying, I want to be in tech, but I don't know where what I want to do. I say, well, go get a job at the help desk. Just get started. Start somewhere.
Hmm.
What's the great thing about the help desk is you kind of start to get a little taste of it all. You get a little bit of networking at some position, just depending on the employer, but you start getting a little bit of taste of it all, and it can really, like, I've seen people who were dead set they're going to get a cybersecurity job, and then they got their first help desk job, and all of a sudden, wow, what our network engineers are doing looks really cool. I'm going to maybe go that way instead. Things change. Now, as someone who's been around CompTIA certifications for a long time, you kind of touched on it with like their expert level certifications, but are there specific areas like cybersecurity or cloud where you really think that CompTIA could improve on and hopefully will improve on with this, recent acquisition?
So some of the things that I think that they can focus on are, again, some of the emerging technologies, right? I know that's a blanketing term, but we need to see more things on programmatic control over networks, right? Right now, I feel that they have it more at a just kind of define that acronym, and I got to be careful when I say that because I've taken a couple of exams that were very, very performance based, and hats off to them. Which is kind of goes back to another thing that you were asking about the hands-on. It's getting today where, and hats off to CompTIA for this, and hopefully this will continue, that their certifications are not just about rogue memorization anymore. You have to know. They will put you into a situation where you have a semi-live environment and you have to be able to click through it. So I think with the emerging technologies, that's one of the things that we'll continue to see. I think we need to continue to see, but I think also we need to be a little bit more focused in areas as well too. And maybe it's hard to say because when you start talking about focus too much, then you lean away from that vendor neutrality.
Right.
I think that's one of the things they've got to stay current with industry trends, and they've got to keep pushing the envelope when it comes to what's relevant to the industry.
I 100% agree with that. Problem with the like memorization stuff that CompTIA always does is, a lot of people will go out, and I absolutely despise this, but people will go out and do brain dump. They'll go do a brain dump for the exam. Right before the exam, they'll go get their certificate, but they don't actually know the knowledge. But that's the problem, is hard memorization things that CompTIA does. It makes it easier for people to go do brain dumps. Whereas not so much if you're getting presented a live virtual environment and you actually have to troubleshoot your way through the scenario. I've had my experience. So as a hiring manager at my current organization, I may have told the story before or last time, but we hired someone who their resume looked amazing. They had, some CompTIA certifications and interviewed really well. Seemed like they knew what they talked about. Week one, like on the job, it was blatantly apparent they didn't know anything that was on their resume. Like things like if you get a CompTIA A+, you should be able to log into the terminal of a network switch or a Linux server. I'm not talking about doing anything but just logging in. They didn't know how to do that. I had to walk them through, and some of the basic commands that you would obviously have to know if you studied for the A+. And it finally came out like, yeah, they did a brain dump, and we had to let that person go within the first week. Like, started on a Monday, got their final check on a Friday, because they didn't actually go study for the material. It's frustrating because, like I said, their resume looked great. They seem to know what they're talking about in the interview, and it will come out. Like if you do brain dumps, it will come out. It's a hard reputation to kind of get rid of, and you have to start all over again because like you wasted the money. Like why blow that money? But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too.
I've always said if you shortchange your training, if you shortchange your hands-on experience, you're going to shortchange your career.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no tolerance or love for brain dumps because with certifications having a lot of rogue memorization to begin with, you already got stuff to memorize. Why would you memorize, just the answer? I don't know. They kind of irk me when it comes down to that. But there again, I tell students, I said, if you're looking for the shortcuts, you're gonna there really aren't any shortcuts on this. In fact, a good friend of mine told me, actually has a good piece of advice to people, said, get comfortable with being uncomfortable and you'll be successful.
That is such a great piece of advice because, in all honesty, the IT industry is evolving faster than it has ever before. I feel things are changing on a daily basis. And if you are getting comfortable in IT, you're falling behind. You have to constantly be learning. You have to constantly upskilling yourself to succeed and excel. I just did a coaching call, like I said, before we had this meeting. I've been in the industry for 6 years, and I was talking about like this where I went. I've told my story before, and I won't rehash it all the way, but in my tech career, I went from the help desk. I landed my first job as a help desk technician to director of network operations within 3 years. My first 3 years of tech. I've been as a, I still am a director of network operations for the same organization, but also I brought up the point where I've gotten, so I just realized the other day, I've gotten over $30,000 in raises working in the same position over the last year. And that's kind of unheard of, like staying at the same exact job and same job title, getting that large of a raise. But you know why I got that large of a raise every year is because I made it my mission to figure out how everything worked. I constantly am learning new skills. Am I an expert? Absolutely freaking not. And I never will be an expert. You will never hear me say I'm an expert in anything, maybe an expert at BS. I constantly have that drive to learn more. I always have to know how it's worked, and I'm always tinkering with stuff. Like I have my home lab here. Half the time I take down my home internet because I'm goofing around trying to learn some new thing and how to integrate it. Having that drive in this field is, I feel, a necessity. I mean, at least if you want to really excel and try to make the big bucks and go far in the career, you got to have that drive to constantly learn more.
Most definitely, this is an always learning career or field, right? You just have to be a lifetime learner and accept that, really, to stay in this career and stay relevant in this career. Another piece of advice, I think I've mentioned it before, that I got from another mentor of mine, said, treat it like a hobby.
Yeah.
If you can treat these concepts, these technologies, if you can treat them like a hobby, you're never going to get tired of it.
Absolutely. And that's what I do. I have a full network stack deployment. I have several different, actually, full network stack deployment. My power bill's a little ridiculous due to it. I have servers, I have VMs, I have NASs, I have, you name it. And I built them from, like, I built my own firewall. I've built my own switches, using open source software and stuff like that. I treat it as a hobby. Like, I come home from work and I'm like, I excited to tinker with stuff here at home. And then I get excited about the stuff I'm doing at home to, like, okay, I learned this. I can actually apply it to my job and upscale there. It's really cool. And, besides, having that drive and motivation, like how else can IT professionals really kind of future proof their careers in kind of these uncertain times we are in right now?
Keep an eye on the certifications, but I really think it's got to be coupled with both. I think it's got to be coupled with hands-on experience and kind of like what you've said, that drive to learn more, that drive to learn something new. If somebody comes to you with something, don't shy away from it. That's easier said than done. I understand that because I'd have to look in a mirror with that one. But remember that the certifications prove that you have those professional level knowledge of the concepts, but they really, really need to be coupled with hands-on experience. And there are so many different locations or avenues that you have today. There's so many different resources today. Let's say if somebody's challenged with the monetary cost of a certification, which, let's face it, that happens. That's a very real reality to some. Well, remember that there are a lot of companies out there that provide what I call kind of the microservice type skills-based certification, right? These little stairs, right? Don't look at the flight of stairs, maybe as being the certification. Well, what about each little step within those stairs? Hack the box, capture a flag, if you're in cybersecurity.
Right.
Attend something online where they offer it free. Microsoft offers free training in certain areas. So I would say use YouTube. My goodness,
Absolutely.
YouTube is an amazing. I mean, it can have a lot of stuff in there that's not so amazing, but it's an amazing resource to have access to.
Absolutely.
In fact, I was trying to figure out how to put this background here in my Black Magic. It took me a bunch of YouTube searching to figure that out. It's just a little button, but we have to do that. And if you have that drive, there are resources out there that you don't have to pay for in order to help you
Absolutely.
continue on. And if you're just getting started out, to help kind of get your feet wet, without jumping in the deep end, right? I would also tell anybody that is, is make sure that the industry is for you. and that's not to discourage anybody from getting out of the, make sure that what you're doing, because there are so many different avenues that you can go in IT. IT isn't just the person that's in the server closet anymore. And just find out what, get your base, your foundation under you, the foundational concepts. And then at that point, you're at a nexus. And then I would focus on things like vendor specific things that, that interest you, whether it be a cloud technology, networking engineers, systems administration and servers. Today, the reality is a lot of those titles are all wrapped under one hat.
Very true. I'm curious. I love your take on it. We're recording this at the January in 2025, and I love your thoughts on what do you think are some of the certifications like people should be looking out for, like some of these game changing. There's been a lot of change in the certification landscape. Is there anything in particular you have your eye on? Like, man, these are some good certifications people should start considering.
I'm really looking at and again, this is just because I'm already in the Azure sphere. So I think if I was in the AWS sphere, it would be in some of the AI design and architectural stuff. I really think that is an avenue because hey, let's face it, even just 2 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about a job for a prompt engineer.
Yeah.
Right. But that is now a very real thing. So that's one of the things that that I can think of.
I heard a good quote the other day because people always are like, man, are tech jobs going away? Is AI replacing them? And I heard a quote that I think is really good. If you are seriously scared about AI taking your job in the tech industry, you're probably in the wrong job, or you're not, you're just doing the bare minimum to get by. I really don't foresee AI maybe down the road 5-10 years plus, at least probably more like 10 years. It might eliminate some of those entry level roles. But like you said, like just a couple of years ago, we never thought there'd be a job for someone just coming up with prompts to prompt AI. It's creating so many more jobs, and the people who are utilizing it now are really like they can write their own check in their career. They can dictate how much they want to make.
Sure.
So yeah, AI I think is really just becoming a game changer, and it's a great resource for people who are utilizing it. And I think the people who are really worried about it taking their job aren't, I think, paying enough attention.
Yeah, so I definitely think AI is, that's an easy one. That's kind of the low hanging fruit when we say what could we see in the future, But the other thing that I would also encourage people to look more in and don't shy away from it is understanding programming. And I don't mean programming as in you're going to get in, you're going to write an application that's going to, solve world hunger. I don't mean anything like that. If we think about it, you have all these different languages that we're using today to control networking, right? Really to control the entire stack, right? Whether it happens to be
Right.
JSON, the more outdated XML, YAML, things like that. But I would learn even some of the basics of programming, like even from a like a Python standpoint, even if it's just the basics, because again, as we're going to see that I think we'll continue to see abstraction
Right.
across the technologies that we already utilize, and with that abstraction usually comes more and more programmatic control. And I think if you understand, coupled with, because a server is a server, a router is a router, but where you're controlling with those devices and how we actually see the overlays and interact with those overlays is dramatically changing. And it has been on a great level, understanding programmatically what is happening.
Network automation is just, I feel like, exploding in the last couple of years. Network automation is nothing new. Let's be honest. It's maybe a new buzzword, but network automation has been around for years, and it just really depends on your definition of network automation and how you're utilizing it.
Sure.
Network automation and programmability could be something as simple as utilizing SNMP. Sorry, cannot talk tonight, but you know what I mean. Scripting languages like Python and stuff like that are going to start becoming more and more invaluable. And the thing is, you don't have to go out and become a Python expert overnight. It's just another tool to start investing in your free time. You don't go out and spend a bunch of money right away. Make sure it's right for you. Make sure it's the path you want to go down. Start with simple. Watch some YouTube videos, and start doing some little projects here on the side.
Mhm.
That's how I got my start into it, and then just kind of further went down the rabbit hole. And then before I know it, I look over, it's 2 a.m. and I got to work the next day, but I really want to finish this code I'm working on. You got to make sure though it's right for you and you're interested in it. And again, if it's not, maybe it's time to reassess and not necessarily get out of tech, but like maybe that you need to pivot and see what you truly are passionate about.
Yeah, and that was another one that you mentioned too. Automation. That is a big thing. Automation, orchestration,
Absolutely.
the thought process around things like containerization. The way we deliver our applications has just changed so dramatically with the cloud. And things are not monolithically stacked on a single server anymore. Things are decoupled all over the place. So understanding things like that as well
Absolutely.
is another thing that's really beneficial to somebody that's getting into the industry. But again, you got to start. We got to crawl before we walk before we run, right? So starting somewhere, just start as a hobby, and like you said, don't be afraid to fall asleep at 2 a.m.
No, I definitely have had those
reading
nights.
something.
And but I have a few more questions for you, but before I do, if people want to connect with you, if they want to ask you further questions and stuff, where can they find you?
Oh, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm there. My email is ws.bryan1@gmail.com. I also have a YouTube channel up with some just basic videos here. Not a lot of voice in them yet, because again, I'm still learning that as well. So, where it's just basic tutorials and stuff like that. But those are the big ones. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I tend to stay towards LinkedIn more than anything, just because I like the more professional look that it has.
LinkedIn has definitely been growing in the tech, especially in the tech industry. I feel like in the last 2 or 3 years, it's just really exploding and is a great resource. I think people aren't leveraging quite enough yet. I will mention, so I'm sorry to go off on a rant here, but like as a hiring manager, when I'm looking at applications and stuff, when I see someone's linked to their LinkedIn, I almost instantly stop reading their resume and go over to their LinkedIn profile because I feel like I get a little bit more natural representation. After I've looked at 100 resumes in a day, they all start looking the same. But LinkedIn, on the other hand, is like I can see, okay, they've posted a lot about, they're working on this project here. I get a little bit more deeper information on that person.
Resource that I would encourage people to utilize too is networking. Networking is, and I don't mean networking from TCP/IP standpoint. Rubbing elbows, right? Talking campfire talks, stuff like that. Get out and look at the community. LinkedIn is a great place to start looking at the community. I reach out to people all the time, and I would encourage others to do the same thing. Look in your area, see if there are groups that focus on IT. We don't have one anymore in our area, but we had the Association of IT Professionals, AITP. CompTIA bought that out. It was CompTIA AITP for a while. That was a great place where people that were already in the industry could come. They could, just talk about what they were doing, and we had people from all different vantage points that would come in. See if you can find things like that. You can go to your local chamber of commerce. There's a lot of times the chamber of commerce will have local city groups, and you can find. I think we've got one here in Gainesville called Code and GNV.
Absolutely.
Yeah, where it's a bunch of programmers that get together, and share whatever programmers share code. I don't think they speak in English.
No, I've used sites in the past like meetup.com, has a lot of times they'll be posting of different tech, meetup groups that are getting together and stuff like that. LinkedIn used to have it, but sometimes you can still find it on LinkedIn. As
Mhm.
people are looking to evolve their skills in the industry, what is one piece of advice you give to someone who is trying to decide like what certification should I go after next?
I don't know if this is a chicken versus the egg question. I would say first, know what your end goal is. Maybe your end goal isn't, hey, I want to start a network administrator. You've kind of mentioned touch base on it. Know what your end goal is, and then work on the foundational aspects of that, because you have to have the communication, right? If you think about it, when you're in elementary school, right, we don't start forming sentences until we learn the alphabet, right? And then after that, we learn, the constructs of the language and stuff, which I never did. I was apparently sleeping. And I think that's a good start to your journey. Remain current with the industry trends, and things like conferences or webinars if you get the chance to, because that can help steer your direction as well. Because one of the things that I've found is that people will tend to gravitate towards what they have read or what they see a lot. That's why we see so many people out there that are in cybersecurity, and everybody wants cybersecurity. but you might find that maybe you don't want to be in cybersecurity. Maybe you, like you said, maybe you look at something and you go, hey, I want to learn how that network is working, and I want to know how I can control it, and then how can I scale that? So I think having a network, that communication with other people, can help you to develop and kind of shape what you feel you should be going after. So as far as the certifications go, I think the certification that are relevant will stay relevant for a while. A lot of the entry level certifications are good just to give people that foot into the industry and the jargon itself. But also remember that it can't just be the certifications by themselves. You really have to know the concepts and have to be able to apply them. The applicability is, at the end of the day, like you've mentioned with the hiree, that's going to be where the line in the sand sometimes is drawn.
Absolutely, 100%. Wes, you've dropped so much great information today. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you again for just being such a great resource in the community.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. This community has reached out to me a lot over the last couple of months too, and I love supporting it. Right? It's one of those things that it has benefited me in so many ways. So it's nice to be able to give back too.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you again for coming on. I can't wait till the next time you come back on the channel and share more wisdom with us. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, let me know down in the comments. And until next time, keep learning.